Picture this. I'm standing in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, holding a stack of bank statements that just shattered my entire world. My hands are literally shaking as I stare at transaction after transaction. $50,000. 50,000 fucking dollars. All transferred from my mother-in-law's account to my husband's personal account over the past 6 months. And there, in black and white, is a memo that made my blood run cold. Payment for services rendered for Project Liberation. I knew my mother-in-law, Patricia, hated me. But paying my own husband 50 grand to leave me? That was some next-level evil shit I never saw coming. And the worst part? The divorce papers he'd served me just 2 days earlier suddenly made perfect sense. This wasn't some sudden decision or marriage breakdown. This was a calculated, cold-blooded business transaction. But here's what Patricia didn't know about me. Here's what nobody in that family knew. I wasn't just some naive little housewife they could steamroll. I was about to show them exactly who they were fucking with, and by the time I was done, Patricia would be begging for mercy she'd never receive. What would you do if you discovered your spouse had been bought and paid for like some kind of mercenary? Hold that thought, because what I did next would make Patricia wish she'd never even heard my name. Let me start from the beginning, because this story is so twisted you need to understand exactly how we got here. My name is Sofia Martinez, and 3 years ago I thought I'd found my fairy tale ending. I was 26, fresh out of my master's program in marketing and working at a small but ambitious tech startup in Austin, Texas. That's where I met Brandon Walsh, tall, charming, with these piercing blue eyes and a smile that could melt butter. He was the company's financial consultant, brought in to help us secure our series of funding. Brandon was everything I thought I wanted in a man. He was 32, established, drove a sleek black BMW, and always knew exactly what to say. Our first date was at this upscale steakhouse downtown called Fleming's. I remember because I'd never been anywhere that fancy before. He ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than my rent, and I was honestly intimidated as fuck. "Relax," he'd said, reaching across the white linen tablecloth to squeeze my hand. "You look like you're about to bolt." "I'm just not used to places like this," I admitted, gesturing around at the dim lighting, crystal glasses, and waiters in actual bow ties. "Well, get used to it," he said with that killer smile. "A woman like you deserves nothing but the best." God, looking back now, I can see all the red flags I missed. But at 26, with student loans up to my eyeballs and sharing a crappy apartment with 2 roommates, Brandon felt like my ticket to a better life. And maybe that makes me shallow, but I'm being honest here. We had this whirlwind romance that felt like something out of a movie. Weekend trips to San Antonio, expensive dinners, designer handbags that probably cost more than I made in a month. Brandon was generous to a fault, or so I thought. He'd pick up every check, buy me clothes for our dates, and shower me with attention that made me feel like the most important person in the world. "I want to take care of you, Sophia," he'd say whenever I protested about the money he was spending. "Let me spoil you. You work so hard, you deserve it." The sex was incredible too, if I'm being completely honest. Brandon knew exactly how to touch me, exactly what to say to drive me wild. Our physical chemistry was off the charts, and I was completely addicted to the way he made me feel, both in bed and out of it. After 6 months of dating, he proposed on a beach in Galveston at sunset. I'm talking full romantic movie shit. Rose petals, champagne, a ring that had to cost at least 10 grand. I said yes without hesitation because I thought I was living in a goddamn fairy tale. "I love you so much, Sophia," he whispered as he slipped that diamond on my finger. "I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy." The wedding planning was a dream come true. We booked the 4 Seasons in downtown Austin, and nothing was too expensive or elaborate. Brandon insisted on paying for everything: the venue, my dress, the photographer, the whole 9 yards. When I worried about the cost, he'd just laugh and kiss my forehead. "Money's not an issue, babe. I want our wedding to be perfect, just like you." But here's where things get interesting and where I should have paid more attention. Throughout our entire relationship and engagement, I'd only met Brandon's mother, Patricia, exactly 3 times. And each time she looked at me like I was dog shit she'd stepped in. Our first meeting was at Brandon's apartment about 2 months into our relationship. Patricia showed up unannounced. Apparently, she had a key and thought nothing of using it. I was in the kitchen making breakfast, wearing one of Brandon's oversized t-shirts and nothing else, when I heard the front door open. "Brandon? Are you home, sweetheart?" came this crisp, authoritative voice. I panicked, grabbing a dish towel to cover my bare legs as Brandon rushed out of the bedroom, looking mortified. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Tricia Walsh stepped into view, and I swear the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. She was in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in what I'd later learn was a Chanel suit, with perfectly styled blonde hair and cold gray eyes that immediately locked onto me with undisguised disgust. "Wow," she said, her voice dripping with disdain as she took in my appearance. "I can see you're occupied." Brandon's face turned red. "Mom, this is Sophia." "Sophia, my mother, Patricia." I tried to smile and step forward to shake her hand, but Patricia's expression stopped me dead in my tracks. "How nice," she said in a tone that made it clear she thought it was anything but nice. Her eyes swept over me from head to toe, and I felt like I was being appraised and found severely lacking. The whole interaction lasted maybe 5 minutes, but the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Patricia made some excuse about needing to discuss family business with Brandon, and I retreated to the bedroom to get dressed, hearing their hushed, urgent voices from the living room. When I came back out, Patricia was gone, and Brandon looked shaken. "She seems nice," I said, trying to lighten the mood. Brandon forced a laugh. "She's just protective. Once she gets to know you, she'll love you." Spoiler alert, she fucking didn't. Our second meeting was at Brandon's birthday dinner 6 months later. Patricia had made reservations at this exclusive restaurant in Westlake Hills that probably required a month's notice and connections I didn't have. I'd spent my entire paycheck on a new dress, this sleek black number from Nordstrom that I thought made me look sophisticated and worthy of being Brandon's girlfriend. The dinner was a nightmare from start to finish. Patricia peppered me with questions that felt more like an interrogation than conversation. "So, Sophia, what do your parents do?" "My mom's a nurse and my dad works construction." "How quaint. And where did you go to school?" "UT Austin for undergrad, then I got my master's there too." "Public school." "I see." She said it like I'd told her I got my degree from a cereal box. Every answer I gave seemed to disappoint her further. When I mentioned my student loans, she actually winced. When I talked about my job at the startup, she looked bored. When I mentioned that I was renting an apartment with roommates, she exchanged a look with Brandon that I couldn't quite interpret. The worst part was how Brandon just sat there and let it happen. He barely spoke during the entire dinner, just nodded along while his mother essentially grilled me about my entire life and found me lacking in every possible way. But our third meeting, that's when I should have known something was seriously fucked up. It was about a month before our wedding, and Patricia had insisted on taking me to lunch to discuss wedding details. I was actually excited, thinking maybe we were finally going to bond, maybe she was ready to accept me as her future daughter-in-law. We met at this upscale bistro in Westlake, the kind of place where a salad costs $30 and everyone speaks in hushed tones. Tricia looked immaculate as always, dressed in cream-colored silk with pearls that probably cost more than my car. "Sophia," she said as I sat down, not bothering with pleasantries. "We need to talk." "Of course. I'm so glad you wanted to do this. I was hoping we could maybe—" "I'll cut right to the chase," she interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade. "You're not right for my son." I felt like I'd been slapped. What? "Brandon is destined for great things. He comes from a good family, has excellent prospects, and deserves a wife who can match his caliber. Someone from his own social circle. Someone who can be an asset to his career, not a liability." My hands started shaking. "Mrs. Walsh, I love Brandon. And he loves me. We're getting married in 4 weeks." "Love," she scoffed, like it was a dirty word. "Love fades, dear." Compatibility, breeding, social standing, these things matter. You're a sweet girl, I'm sure, but you're completely wrong for him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This is crazy. You can't just decide. I can and I have. Patricia opened her purse and pulled out what looked like a check. I'm prepared to offer you $50,000 to walk away from my son. Leave Austin, start fresh somewhere else, find someone more suitable for your circumstances. I stared at that check like it was a snake about to bite me. $50,000. More money than I'd ever seen in my life. The more money than I'd make in an entire year. You're trying to buy me off? I whispered. I'm offering you an opportunity to do the right thing. Tricia's voice was calm, businesslike. Take the money, disappear from Brandon's life, and everyone wins. You get a fresh start, and my son gets the chance to find an appropriate wife. The rage that built up inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. This woman, this entitled, privileged bitch, thought she could just write me a check and erase me from her son's life like I was some kind of inconvenience. Go fuck yourself, I said, standing up so fast my chair nearly toppled over. Patricia's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? You heard me. Go. Fuck. Yourself. I was shaking with anger now. I'm marrying your son whether you like it or not, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I walked out of that restaurant feeling powerful and righteous. I thought I'd won. I thought I'd stood up to the evil mother-in-law and proved that love conquers all. God, I was such a naive fucking idiot. I never told Brandon about his mother's little bribery attempt. Maybe I should have, but I figured it would just cause drama and I wanted our wedding to be perfect. I convinced myself that once we were married, Patricia would have to accept me. I thought she'd back down and eventually learn to love me. Our wedding day was absolutely magical. The Four Seasons looked like something out of a magazine, with white roses and twinkling lights everywhere. My dress was this gorgeous flowing gown that made me feel like a princess. Brandon looked incredible in his custom tuxedo, and when he saw me walking down the aisle, he actually teared up. You're so beautiful, he whispered when I reached the altar. I'm the luckiest man in the world. The ceremony was perfect, the reception was incredible, and for one night I felt like I was living in a fairy tale. Even Patricia seemed to be on her best behavior, smiling for photos and making polite conversation with my family. But now I know the truth. Now I know she was already planning my destruction. After the wedding, Brandon and I moved into this beautiful house in Cedar Park that he'd bought as a wedding gift. It was a gorgeous 2-story colonial with a big backyard, granite countertops, and more space than I'd ever had in my entire life. I thought we were starting our perfect married life. The first year was honestly pretty great. Brandon was attentive and loving, we traveled together, and I felt like we were building something real. Sure, Patricia was still cold to me at family gatherings, but I figured that was just her personality. I thought eventually she'd warm up. But looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. The way Brandon would get weird phone calls from his mother that he'd taken private. The way he'd sometimes seem distant after those calls. The way Patricia would make little comments designed to undermine my confidence. Oh, Sophia, that dress is so interesting. Very brave of you to wear something so bold. Brandon, darling, remember when you used to date that lovely Sarah Mitchell? She's doing so well at her father's law firm now. I hope you're encouraging Brandon to focus on his career, Sophia. He has such potential, it would be a shame if he got distracted. Little digs, little cuts, death by 1,000 paper cuts. And I let it happen because I thought keeping the peace was more important than standing up for myself. But the real problem started in year 2 of our marriage. Brandon began working late more often, seeming stressed about money even though we lived comfortably. He'd get snippy with me over little things like leaving dishes in the sink or forgetting to pick up his dry cleaning. Jesus, Sophia, is it too much to ask for you to keep the house decent? I work my ass off all day. I work too, Brandon. Full-time, remember? Your little marketing job isn't exactly bringing in the big bucks, is it? That stung, especially since I'd been working my way up at the startup and actually making decent money. But Brandon made me feel like my contributions didn't matter, like I was just playing at having a career while he did the real work. The worst part was how he'd apologize afterward, bringing me flowers and taking me to dinner, making me feel like I was overreacting to his mood swings. I'm sorry, babe. Work's just been stressful. You know I appreciate everything you do, right? And like an idiot, I'd forgive him every time. 'Cause I loved him and I thought marriage was about working through problems together. But the problems kept getting worse. Brandon started criticizing everything about me, my cooking, my appearance, my friends, my family. He'd make comments about how I needed to step up my game if I wanted to be married to someone with his prospects. Maybe you should think about getting your hair done professionally, he'd say while I was getting ready for one of his work events. And that dress, don't you have something more sophisticated? I started second-guessing myself constantly. Was I not pretty enough? Not smart enough? Not classy enough for Brandon Walsh? I began spending money I didn't have on clothes and beauty treatments, trying to transform myself into whatever it was he wanted me to be. And through it all, Patricia was there, smiling her cold smile, making her subtle comments, watching me slowly fall apart. Oh, Brandon, you look tired. I hope married life isn't wearing you down too much. Sophia, dear, have you gained weight? The marriage does that to some women. I ran into Margaret Henderson at the country club. Her daughter Jessica just made partner at her law firm. She's still single, you know. The final nail in the coffin of my marriage came about 6 months ago, when Brandon started talking about us taking a break. I think we rushed into this, Sophia. Maybe we need some time apart to figure out what we really want. Are you fucking kidding me? We're married, Brandon. We made vows. I know, but I'm just not happy. I haven't been happy for a while. So we work on it. We go to counseling, we figure it out together. But he'd already made up his mind. And now I know why. 'Cause Patricia had already paid him to make up his mind. 2 days ago, Brandon served me with divorce papers. Not only was he leaving me, but he was trying to claim I was an unfit wife who had failed to contribute meaningfully to the marriage. He wanted me out of the house with barely anything, claiming that since the house was in his name and most of our assets were from his premarital wealth, I was entitled to almost nothing. I was devastated. Heartbroken. I thought my life was over. But then, at 3 in the morning, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to make some tea, and that's when I saw Brandon's laptop sitting open on the kitchen counter. He'd been careless, leaving his banking app logged in. I know I shouldn't have looked. I know it was an invasion of privacy. But something told me to check, some little voice in the back of my head that said this whole situation was wrong. And that's when I found them. Transaction after transaction from Patricia's account to Brandon's. $50,000 over 6 months, with that memo that made everything crystal clear. Payment for services rendered, project liberation. My husband hadn't just fallen out of love with me. He'd been paid to fall out of love with me. Patricia had literally bought my marriage's destruction, and Brandon had sold it to her. I sat there in that dark kitchen, staring at those bank statements, and something inside me just broke. But not in the way you might think. I didn't crumble or cry or fall apart. Instead, I felt this cold, calculating rage settle over me like armor. Tricia Walsh thought she was so smart, so sophisticated, so much better than me. She thought she could manipulate my entire life like I was some kind of chess piece. She thought she could buy my husband and destroy my marriage without consequences. She had no fucking idea who she was dealing with. Can you believe the audacity of this woman? Paying her own son to divorce his wife? And Brandon, Jesus Christ, taking money from his mommy to betray the woman who loved him? But here's what they didn't know about me. Here's what Patricia's little background check obviously missed when she decided I wasn't good enough for her precious son. I wasn't just some small-town girl with student loans and a humble background. I was a woman who'd clawed her way up from nothing, who'd earned every fucking thing she'd ever had, and who'd learned early in life that when people try to knock you down, you get up swinging. And I was about to teach both of them exactly what happens when you underestimate Sofia Martinez. What would you do in my situation? Would you just take the divorce and walk away? Would you try to fight it in court with lawyers you couldn't afford? Or would you do what I did? Start planning the kind of revenge that would make them both regret the day they ever decided to fuck with me? 'Cause let me tell you, what I had planned for Patricia and Brandon was going to be so much worse than anything they'd done to me. They wanted to play games with my life? Fine. But they were about to learn that I played for keeps. The first thing I did after discovering Patricia's little payment plan was take photos of everything. Every single bank statement, every transaction, every piece of evidence that proved my mother-in-law had literally purchased my divorce. I wasn't about to let them destroy the evidence or claim I was making it all up. My hands were still shaking as I scrolled through Brandon's email account. Yeah, he was dumb enough to leave that open too. And what I found there made my blood boil even hotter. Email after email between Brandon and his mother, dating back almost 2 years. 2 fucking years they'd been plotting my destruction. Brandon, darling, I'm worried about your marriage. Sofia just isn't the right fit for our family. She's holding you back from your true potential. I know, Mom, but I can't just leave her. She hasn't done anything wrong. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions for the greater good. What if I could help make the transition easier for both of you? And there it was, the beginning of their sick little conspiracy. Patricia slowly poisoning Brandon's mind against me while dangling financial incentives like carrots in front of a starving horse. The emails got progressively more detailed and more disgusting. Patricia outlining her strategy for making me look like an unsuitable wife. Brandon reporting back on my reactions to his increasingly cruel behavior. She cried again last night when I criticized her cooking. Maybe I'm being too subtle. Patience, darling. We need this to look natural. Keep documenting her emotional instability. That will be useful later. Emotional instability. They were calling my normal human reactions to psychological abuse emotional instability. I wanted to burn down the entire fucking world. But the worst email was from just 3 weeks ago. The final payment will be transferred tomorrow. $50,000 should be more than enough to start your new life once this unpleasantness is behind you. Remember, we need her to appear as the unstable party who couldn't handle marriage to a successful man. The story must be that she became increasingly erratic and demanding, forcing you to make the difficult decision to end things. Patricia had crafted an entire narrative about who I was and why our marriage failed. She'd turned me into the villain of my own life story, and Brandon had helped her do it for money. I sat there reading those emails until the sun came up, and with each word my resolve hardened. These people had played me like a fucking fiddle, but they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated exactly how ruthless I could be when pushed too far. See, here's what Patricia's little background check on me had missed. While she was busy investigating my parents' jobs and my student loan debt, she'd failed to dig into my actual skills and talents. She saw a girl from a working-class family and assumed that meant I was weak, naive, easily manipulated. What she didn't know was that I'd spent the last 3 years working for a tech startup that specialized in digital marketing and reputation management. I knew exactly how to research people online, how to find information they thought was hidden, and how to build compelling narratives that could destroy or elevate someone's reputation with surgical precision. More importantly, I'd grown up watching my mother deal with my alcoholic father's bullshit for 15 years before she finally got smart and left his ass. I'd learned early that sometimes good people have to do ugly things to protect themselves. Sometimes you have to fight fire with a fucking flamethrower. Patricia wanted to play psychological warfare? Game fucking on. First step was gathering intelligence. If I was going to destroy Patricia Walsh, I needed to know everything about her, her weaknesses, her secrets, her vulnerabilities. Every person has something they're desperate to hide, and I was going to find Patricia's. I started with social media. Patricia wasn't on Facebook or Instagram. too pedestrian for someone of her caliber, but she was on LinkedIn and her profile was a goldmine of information. She was the president of some charity organization called the Highland Park Women's Foundation. She sat on the board of directors for a private school. She was involved with the Austin Symphony League. All very proper, very respectable positions for a woman of her social standing. Which meant she had a reputation to protect. And reputations, as I knew better than most, were fragile things. Next, I started digging into her financial situation. This took more creativity, but I had some advantages Patricia didn't know about. One of my college roommates, Jennifer, worked for a private investigation firm that specialized in asset searches for divorce lawyers. She owed me a favor from when I'd helped her land the job, and she was more than willing to do some discreet digging in exchange for a nice bottle of wine and the promise that I'd never mention where the information came from. What Jennifer found was interesting as hell. Patricia Walsh wasn't quite as financially secure as she pretended to be. Her late husband had left her well off, but not nearly as wealthy as her lifestyle suggested. She'd been burning through her inheritance faster than she was making it, trying to maintain appearances in Austin's high society circles. The $50,000 she'd paid Brandon to leave me? That was a significant chunk of her liquid assets. Not enough to bankrupt her, but enough to hurt if she lost it. But the really juicy stuff came from public records and some creative Google searching. Patricia had been married twice before Brandon's father. Her first marriage, when she was barely 19, had ended in scandal when her husband was arrested for embezzling funds from his family's construction company. The records were sealed, but local newspaper archives told the story of young Patricia Montgomery, her maiden name, fleeing town in the middle of the night when the shit hit the fan. Her second marriage had lasted less than 2 years before ending in a messy divorce where she'd accused her husband of physical abuse while he'd accused her of adultery and gold digging. Again, most of the details were sealed, but there were enough breadcrumbs to paint a picture of a woman who'd spent her entire life using men to climb the social ladder. And then there was Brandon's father, Richard Walsh. He'd been significantly older than Patricia, 20 years her senior when they married. He died of a heart attack when Brandon was 15, leaving Patricia a wealthy widow with a teenage son and no supervision. The more I learned about Patricia's history, the clearer the pattern became. She was a social climber who'd married for money and status, then spent decades trying to erase her humble origins and reinvent herself as old money aristocracy. Her entire identity was built on lies and pretense, which meant she had everything to lose if the truth came out. But I needed more than just historical dirt. I needed something current, something that would give me real leverage over her. So I did what any smart woman in the digital age would do. I became a stalker. Not in a creepy, illegal way. Just thorough online surveillance. I created fake social media accounts and started following Patricia's friends, her charity organization, her country club. I signed up for newsletters from every organization she was involved with. I started attending public events where she might appear. And slowly, carefully, I began to build a complete picture of Patricia Walsh's carefully curated life. She had lunch every Tuesday at the same upscale restaurant in Westlake with the same group of society women. She played tennis every Thursday morning at the country club. She attended charity galas, symphony performances, and art gallery openings with religious regularity. Her entire life was built around being seen in the right places with the right people. More importantly, I learned that Patricia's social standing was more precarious than it appeared. Austin's old money families tolerated her, but they didn't really accept her. She was always trying too hard, always volunteering for the most visible charity positions, always making sure her name appeared in the society pages of the local magazines. She needed their approval desperately, which meant she'd do anything to avoid their disapproval. And that's when I found my weapon. It happened completely by accident. I was scrolling through the Highland Park Women's Foundation website, reading about their latest fundraising efforts when I noticed something odd about their financial reports. The numbers didn't quite add up. Donations received versus programs funded. There was a discrepancy that wasn't easily explained. Now, I'm not an accountant, but I'd spent enough time working with startup financials to recognize when something was fishy. And this was definitely fishy. I dug deeper, cross-referencing public tax filings with the Foundation's published reports. The more I looked, the more obvious it became that money was being diverted from the Foundation's stated charitable purposes. A lot of money. Like potentially 6 figures worth of money. And guess who had signature authority on the Foundation's accounts? Guess who'd been president of the organization for the past 5 years with minimal oversight from the board? Patricia fucking Walsh, that's who. I couldn't prove she was stealing. That would require access to records I couldn't legally obtain. But I could see enough to know that someone was playing fast and loose with charity funds, and Patricia was the most likely suspect. This was it. This was the nuclear option I'd been looking for. Patricia had spent years building her reputation as Austin's charitable society queen, and I was about to blow it all up. But I wasn't ready to drop that bomb yet. First, I wanted to see how far I could push her with more conventional methods. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't the helpless little victim she thought I was. So I started my campaign of psychological warfare. Began with small things. I created anonymous social media accounts and started commenting on posts from Patricia's friends and organizations. Nothing obviously malicious, just subtle questions and observations designed to plant seeds of doubt. Such a lovely event. Though I do wonder where all the money raised actually goes. It's so hard to track these things sometimes. Patricia Walsh seems so devoted to charity work. I hope she's being properly compensated for all her time and effort. Doesn't Patricia look tired lately? I worry about these women who take on so much responsibility. The stress must be enormous. I attended a charity gala where Patricia was being honored as Volunteer of the Year, and I made sure to introduce myself to several board members. Oh, you work with Patricia? She seems lovely. I hope you have good financial oversight. I've heard such horror stories about well-meaning volunteers getting in over their heads with money management. Nothing actionable, nothing she could trace back to me. Just gentle poison dripped into the right ears at the right times. And slowly I started to see results. Patricia began looking more stressed at public events. She started drinking more at social gatherings. I could tell because her carefully controlled facade would slip slightly after her second glass of wine. She became more aggressive in her networking, more desperate in her attempts to ingratiate herself with Austin's power players. She knew something was wrong, but she couldn't figure out what. Meanwhile, I was playing the perfect grieving wife. I showed up to our few mutual social connections looking devastated but brave. I let it be known that Brandon had left me suddenly and inexplicably, that I was heartbroken but trying to hold my head high. I just don't understand what happened, I'd say with tears in my eyes. We seemed so happy. I thought we were building a life together. People ate that shit up. I became the sympathetic victim of a cruel husband who'd abandoned his loving wife without explanation. And since Brandon was keeping a low profile, probably on Mommy's advice, he couldn't really defend himself without looking like even more of an asshole. But the real masterstroke was what I did to Brandon's business reputation. Remember, Brandon worked as a financial consultant. His entire livelihood depended on clients trusting him with their money. So I started a quiet whisper campaign about his reliability and judgment. I didn't lie about him, I didn't need to. I just made sure the right people knew that Brandon Walsh was the kind of man who would abandon his wife suddenly and without explanation. That he was going through a messy divorce. That he might be experiencing personal problems that could affect his professional judgment. Nothing slanderous, nothing legally actionable. Just concerns about his stability and character, shared confidentially with people who might do business with him. Financial services is a small world in Austin, and reputation is everything. Within a few weeks, I started hearing through mutual connections that Brandon was having trouble retaining clients. People were questioning his judgment, his stability, his character. His business was bleeding money while his mother bled her savings to pay him for destroying our marriage. It was beautiful in its own twisted way. But I was just getting started. 'Cause Patricia thought she was so smart, so manipulative, so untouchable. She had no idea that every move she'd made against me was about to come back on her tenfold. The beauty of my plan was its elegance. I wasn't going to stoop to their level and fight dirty. I was going to use their own weapons against them: reputation, social standing, and money. The same tools Patricia had used to try to destroy me were about to become the instruments of her own destruction. And the best part? She was going to help me do it. Can you imagine thinking you're so clever, so superior, only to realize you've been outplayed by the woman you thought was beneath you? Patricia was about to learn that lesson the hard way. But before I could execute the final phase of my plan, something happened that I didn't expect. Something that changed everything and gave me an opportunity for revenge so perfect, so poetic, that it felt like the universe itself was on my side. What do you think happened? What kind of opportunity could possibly make Patricia's situation even worse than it already was? 3 weeks into my revenge campaign, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was from my friend Jennifer, the one who worked at the private investigation firm. "Sophia, you need to meet me for coffee. Like right now. I've got information about your situation that you're not going to believe." We met at a small cafe in South Austin, away from anywhere Patricia or Brandon might frequent. Jennifer looked excited and nervous at the same time, clutching a manila folder like it contained state secrets. "Okay, so remember how you asked me to dig into Patricia Walsh's finances?" she said, sliding the folder across the table. "Well, I found something that's going to blow your fucking mind." I opened the folder and started reading, and my mouth literally fell open. Patricia hadn't just been skimming money from the Highland Park Women's Foundation. She'd been running a sophisticated embezzlement scheme for almost 3 years. It was brilliant, actually. She'd set up a fake vendor company that provided consulting services to the foundation. Every few months, she'd approve payments to this company for things like strategic planning and program development. Payments that went directly into an account she controlled. Over 3 years, she'd stolen almost $200,000 from a charity that was supposed to help underprivileged women and children in Austin. "How the fuck did you find this?" I asked, staring at bank records and corporate filings that clearly showed the money trail. "That's where it gets interesting," Jennifer said, grinning like the cat who ate the canary. "I didn't find it. Someone else did, and they've been quietly building a case for months." She pulled out another document, a letter from the Texas Attorney General's office. Patricia Walsh was already under investigation for charity fraud. The state had been building a case against her, gathering evidence, preparing to file charges. "They're moving slow because they want to make sure they have everything buttoned up," Jennifer explained. "But my contact in the AG's office says they're planning to arrest her within the next 2 weeks." I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Patricia was about to be arrested for embezzling from a children's charity. Her carefully constructed reputation was about to explode in the most public, humiliating way possible. But here's the thing, I realized I could make it so much worse. "Jennifer, does the AG's office know about the $50,000 she paid Brandon to divorce me?" "What are you talking about?" I told her everything. The bank records, the emails, the entire conspiracy to destroy my marriage. Jennifer's eyes got wider and wider as I explained how Patricia had literally purchased my divorce. "Holy shit, Sophia. That's financial fraud. She used stolen charity money to pay her son to leave his wife. This isn't just embezzlement anymore. It's a goddamn conspiracy." And that's when the most beautiful, perfect, absolutely diabolical plan crystallized in my mind. I was going to make sure the world knew exactly what Patricia Walsh really was. Not just a charity embezzler, but a manipulative sociopath who destroyed her son's marriage with stolen money intended for disadvantaged children. The media was going to eat this story alive. Rich society woman steals from children's charity to buy her son's divorce? It had everything: money, scandal, betrayal, and the kind of moral corruption that makes people's skin crawl. But first, I needed to make sure Brandon got exactly what he deserved too. I went home and called my lawyer. Well, the divorce lawyer I'd hired with the last of my savings account. David Chen was young, hungry, and pissed off about how Brandon was trying to screw me in the divorce settlement. David, I need you to file an emergency motion to freeze all of Brandon's assets. On what grounds? Fraud. I have evidence that he received $50,000 in payments that he didn't disclose in his financial affidavit. The money that may have been obtained through criminal means. I could hear David's interest spike through the phone. What kind of evidence? I told him about the bank records and emails. I explained how Patricia had been stealing from charity and using that money to pay Brandon. David was practically salivating by the time I finished. Sophia, this changes everything. If we can prove Brandon knew the money came from fraudulent sources, he could face criminal charges himself. Even if he didn't know, failure to disclose a $50,000 payment is perjury. How fast can you file? I can have the motion ready by tomorrow morning. But are you sure about this? Once we go nuclear, there's no going back. I thought about Patricia's smug face when she tried to buy me off. I thought about Brandon's cruel comments and fake apologies. I thought about how they'd conspired to gaslight me and make me think I was the problem with our marriage. File it, I said. File everything. I want these people to burn. David filed the emergency motion the next morning, and by noon, Brandon's bank accounts were frozen pending a hearing. He called me screaming within an hour. What the fuck did you do, Sophia? I can't access any of my money. I didn't do anything, Brandon. The court did that when they found out about your secret $50,000 windfall. Silence. Dead fucking silence. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Project Liberation, remember? That's what your mommy called it in the bank memos. More silence. Then, you went through my private financial information? You mean the information you left open on your laptop? The information you were legally required to disclose in our divorce but didn't? Yeah, I saw it. And now so has the court. I could practically hear his panic through the phone. Sophia, you don't understand. This is going to ruin everything. Good, I said and hung up. But Brandon's panic was nothing compared to what happened when Patricia found out her son's assets were frozen. She showed up at my house that evening, pounding on the door like a woman possessed. When I opened it, she looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past 24 hours. You vindictive little bitch, she snarled, pushing past me into my living room. What have you done? I've told the truth, I said calmly. Something you and your son seem incapable of. You're destroying his life over nothing. So what if I helped him realize he'd made a mistake? So what if I facilitated his escape from a marriage that was never going to work? You paid him $50,000 to leave me, Patricia. With money you stole from a children's charity. Color drained from her face. I don't know what you think you know, but I know everything, I interrupted. I know about the Highland Park Women's Foundation. I know about your fake consulting company. I know about every penny you've stolen over the past 3 years. Patricia's carefully controlled mask finally slipped completely. The rage that came out was pure, undiluted hatred. You have no idea what you're dealing with, she hissed. You're a nobody from nowhere, and you think you can take me down? I have connections you can't even imagine. I will destroy you so completely that the Attorney General's office is going to arrest you next week, I said quietly. Patricia stopped mid-threat, her mouth hanging open. That's right. They've been investigating you for months. They have all the evidence they need to prove you've been embezzling from charity. And now, thanks to my divorce filing, they also know you used stolen money to bribe your son into leaving his wife. I walked over to my window and looked out at the beautiful evening. You know what the media's going to call you, Patricia? The charity thief who destroyed her son's marriage with stolen children's money. That's going to be your legacy. Patricia was shaking now, her whole body trembling with rage and fear. "What do you want?" she whispered. "What do I want?" I turned back to face her, and for the first time in our entire relationship, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "I want you to understand that you fucked with the wrong woman. I want you to know that every cruel word, every manipulation, every dollar you spent trying to destroy my life is going to come back on you 10 times worse." "Please," she said, and the word came out like she was choking on it. "There has to be something we can work out. Some way to resolve this quietly." "Oh, now you want to work something out?" I laughed, and it was not a nice sound. "Where was this attitude when you were bribing my husband to leave me? When you were calling me emotionally unstable? When you were plotting my destruction for 2 fucking years?" Patricia was crying now, makeup running down her cheeks, looking nothing like the composed society queen she pretended to be. "I'll pay you back," she sobbed. "I'll return the money to the charity. I'll make this right." "With what money, Patricia? You've already spent most of it trying to maintain your bullshit lifestyle and pay your son to betray his wife. You're broke, you're about to be arrested, and your reputation is going to be destroyed." I walked to my front door and opened it. "Get out of my house. And don't ever come back." Patricia stumbled toward the door, looking like a broken old woman instead of the formidable adversary she'd once seemed. "This isn't over," she said weakly. "Yes, it is," I replied. "You just don't know it yet." After Patricia left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 6 months ago, I'd been a naive wife who thought love could conquer all. Now I was a woman who'd orchestrated the complete destruction of 2 people who'd tried to destroy me first. And the beautiful thing was, I'd barely had to lift a finger. Patricia and Brandon had destroyed themselves with their own greed and stupidity. I just helped the process along. The next morning, I called a reporter I knew from my startup days, a woman named Rachel Torres who worked for the Austin American-Statesman. Rachel specialized in stories about corruption and white-collar crime, and she owed me a favor from when I'd helped her get access to sources for a previous story. "Rachel, I've got a story for you that's going to win you awards." "I'm listening." I told her everything. The charity embezzlement, the marriage bribery, the conspiracy between mother and son. I gave her copies of all the evidence I'd gathered, all the documentation that proved Patricia's crimes and Brandon's complicity. "Holy shit, Sophia. This is huge. When can I run this?" "The Attorney General's office is arresting her next week. You can break the story the day after the arrest. And you're okay with being named in the story? This is going to get messy." "I want to be named," I said. "I want everyone to know exactly what Patricia Walsh did to me and how it backfired spectacularly." The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning. Patricia was taken into custody at her home, led away in handcuffs while news cameras captured every humiliating moment. Charges were extensive: charity fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and half a dozen other felonies that would put her away for years. Rachel's story ran the next day with the headline, "Society Charity Queen Arrested for Embezzling Children's Funds to Buy Son's Divorce." The article detailed everything: Patricia's history of social climbing and manipulation, the systematic theft from the Highland Park Women's Foundation, the sick scheme to pay Brandon to leave me, my discovery of the conspiracy and how I'd helped bring it all to light. Public reaction was swift and brutal. Patricia became the most hated woman in Austin overnight. Social media exploded with outrage about a rich woman stealing from children to manipulate her son's marriage. The story went viral nationally, with every major news outlet picking it up. Brandon was arrested 3 days later on charges of conspiracy and fraud. Turns out, prosecutors could prove he'd known the money came from illegal sources, making him complicit in his mother's crimes. The divorce proceedings became a formality after that. With Brandon facing felony charges and all his assets frozen, he was in no position to fight for anything. I got the house, half of what remained of his legitimate assets, and a settlement that would keep me comfortable while I rebuilt my life. But the best part wasn't the money or the house or even seeing them both led away in handcuffs. The best part was watching Patricia's entire carefully constructed world crumble around her. Every organization she'd been involved with dropped her immediately. Every friend she'd cultivated abandoned her. Every social connection she'd spent decades building evaporated overnight. She went from being Austin's charity queen to being the city's most despised criminal in less than a week. Can you believe how perfectly it all worked out? How Patricia's own greed and arrogance became the weapons I used to destroy her. She thought she was so much smarter than me, so much better than me. She thought she could manipulate my entire life without consequences. But here's what she never understood. Underestimating people is the most dangerous mistake you can make. And when you underestimate someone who's got nothing left to lose, you're basically handing them a loaded gun and asking them to shoot you. Would you have done what I did? Would you have gone nuclear and destroyed them both, or would you have taken the high road and just walked away? Let me know in the comments. But I am sure you are thinking you might think that's where the story ends, with Patricia and Brandon both arrested, their lives destroyed, and me victorious. But you'd be wrong, because the most shocking twist was yet to come, and it would reveal just how deep this conspiracy really went. It started with a phone call 2 weeks after Patricia's arrest. I was at home, finally starting to feel like I could relax for the first time in months when my phone rang. The number was blocked, but something told me to answer it. Is this Sophia Martinez? The voice was female, older, with a slight southern accent. Yes, who is this? My name is Margaret Walsh. Patricia is my daughter-in-law. I nearly dropped the phone. Patricia's mother-in-law? Brandon's grandmother? What the hell did she want with me? I know this might seem strange, Margaret continued, but I need to meet with you. There are things about Patricia that you need to know. Things that will change everything you think you understand about what happened to you. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe in Round Rock, far from anywhere we might be recognized or overheard. Margaret Walsh was in her early 80s, impeccably dressed in the way that only women of her generation and social class could manage. She had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, but I could see steel underneath the genteel exterior. "Thank you for coming, dear," she said as I sat down across from her. "I know you have no reason to trust anyone with the Walsh name, but I hope you'll hear me out." "I'm listening." Margaret opened her purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Patricia has been lying to everyone for over 30 years. About her background, about her first marriage, about how she met my son Richard. Most importantly, she's been lying about Brandon. What do you mean? Brandon isn't Richard's biological son. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Patricia was already pregnant when she met my son. She never told him the truth about Brandon's paternity, and Richard died believing the boy was his. Margaret's voice was steady, but I could see the pain in her eyes. I've known for years, but I kept quiet because I loved that little boy like he was my own blood. But after what Patricia did to you, after seeing her true nature finally exposed, I can't stay silent anymore. She pushed the envelope across the table. Patricia blackmailed Brandon's real father for years. Threatened to expose their affair and destroy his marriage if he didn't pay her. That's how she maintained her lifestyle after Richard died. Not from my son's inheritance, but from blood money. My hands were shaking as I opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, letters, bank records, and what looked like a private investigator's report. Who is Brandon's real father? I asked. Judge William Hendricks. I knew that name. Everyone in Austin knew that name. Judge Hendricks was one of the most respected jurists in Texas, a pillar of the legal community, married to the same woman for 40 years with a sterling reputation. He's been paying Patricia $3,000 a month for the past 15 years, Margaret continued. She told him it was for Brandon's support, but really it was just extortion. She bled that man dry while pretending to be a grieving widow living on her late husband's money. I stared at the evidence in front of me. Photos of Patricia meeting with Judge Hendricks, bank records showing regular payments, even copies of threatening letters she'd sent when he tried to stop paying. "Why are you telling me this?" Margaret's expression hardened. "Because Patricia destroyed my family with her lies and manipulation. She turned my grandson against everyone who tried to show him love and guidance. She poisoned him against his real father, against me, against anyone who might threaten her control over him." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And because there's more. Patricia didn't just steal from one charity, Sophia. She's been running cons for decades. The Highland Park Women's Foundation was just her latest target." She pulled out another set of documents. Before Austin, she lived in Dallas. Before Dallas, Houston. Before Houston, San Antonio. Every time the same pattern. She'd ingratiate herself with wealthy society circles, gain access to charitable organizations, and systematically rob them blind. "How do you know all this?" "I hired a private investigator after Richard died," Margaret admitted. Something about Patricia never sat right with me, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. The more I learned, the more horrified I became. But I was an old woman with no proof, and who was going to believe me over Austin's charity darling? The scope of Patricia's crimes was staggering. She'd stolen from children's hospitals, animal shelters, scholarship funds, and disaster relief organizations across 4 Texas cities over nearly 2 decades. She was a professional con artist who'd perfected the art of appearing respectable while systematically robbing the most vulnerable. "The FBI is going to want to see this," I said, still processing everything Margaret had told me. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." And that's how I found myself back in the spotlight, but this time as a federal witness helping to expose one of the most sophisticated charity fraud schemes in Texas history. The FBI had been tracking unusual patterns in charity thefts across multiple states, but they'd never been able to connect them to a single perpetrator. Patricia had been careful, never staying in one place too long, always moving on before anyone could piece together the full scope of her crimes. But Margaret's evidence changed everything. Suddenly, the FBI had a clear pattern of behavior spanning 2 decades and multiple jurisdictions. They had financial records, witness statements, and a paper trail that connected Patricia to dozens of fraudulent schemes. More importantly, they now knew about Judge Hendricks. The revelation that a sitting federal judge had been paying blackmail money for 15 years sent shockwaves through the legal community. Judge Hendricks was immediately suspended pending investigation, and his decades of judicial decisions came under scrutiny. But here's where the story gets even crazier. Judge Hendricks wasn't Patricia's only victim. As the FBI dug deeper into her blackmail schemes, they discovered she'd been extorting at least 6 other prominent men across Texas. Politicians, business leaders, religious figures, all married men who'd had affairs with Patricia and found themselves trapped in her web of threats and financial demands. She'd built an entire criminal empire based on seduction, blackmail, and charity fraud. For 20 years, she'd lived like a queen on money stolen from children, disaster victims, and the proceeds of destroying marriages and reputations. And Brandon? He'd known. Maybe not everything, but he'd known enough. During his FBI interview, it came out that Brandon had been helping his mother launder money through various investment accounts. He'd been her financial frontman, using his credentials as a consultant to legitimize her stolen funds. When he'd married me, Patricia had panicked. She was afraid I'd eventually discover their criminal enterprise, so she'd decided I had to go. The $50,000 she'd paid him wasn't just bribery, it was his cut of their latest charity heist, payment for helping her steal from the Highland Park Women's Foundation. My marriage hadn't just been destroyed by a manipulative mother-in-law. It had been destroyed by a criminal conspiracy that had been operating for decades. The trials were a media circus. Patricia faced federal charges in 4 states, with prosecutors seeking over 30 years in prison for racketeering, fraud, extortion, and money laundering. Brandon was looking at 15 years as her accomplice. But the biggest shock came during Patricia's sentencing hearing, when she finally broke down and revealed the truth about why she'd targeted me so specifically. She wasn't supposed to be smart enough to figure it out, Patricia sobbed from the witness stand. Brandon told me she was just some working-class girl who'd be grateful for his attention. When I researched her background, everything suggested she'd be easy to manipulate and discard. Prosecutor pressed her. But something changed your assessment? She started asking questions about our finances, about Brandon's income versus our lifestyle. She was getting suspicious about money she had no business questioning. Tricia's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the cold, calculating predator underneath. I realized she might eventually uncover everything, so she had to go. But I needed it to look natural, like Brandon had simply outgrown her. So you paid your son $50,000 to destroy his marriage? I paid him what he was owed for helping with the foundation job, Patricia snapped, her true nature finally emerging. The marriage destruction was just efficient problem-solving. Courtroom was dead silent. Even the judge looked disgusted. Mrs. Walsh, in 30 years on this bench, I've never encountered such callous disregard for human dignity. You destroyed a young woman's life not out of malice, but out of convenience. Because she might have threatened your criminal enterprise. Patricia was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. 62 years old, it was effectively a life sentence. Brandon got 12 years as a cooperating witness, though he'd be eligible for parole and 8 with good behavior. Judge Hendricks pleaded guilty to related charges and was sentenced to 5 years, ending a distinguished legal career in complete disgrace. The other men Patricia had blackmailed faced various consequences, some criminal, others merely the destruction of their marriages and reputations. But for me, the most satisfying moment came when I testified during Patricia's sentencing hearing. I got to look her in the eye and tell the world exactly what she'd put me through. Patricia Walsh didn't just steal money, I said, staring directly at her. She stole my sense of reality. For months, she and her son made me believe I was crazy, that I was the problem with my marriage, that I was somehow inadequate as a wife. They systematically destroyed my self-esteem and gaslight me into questioning my own sanity. Patricia refused to look at me, staring down at her hands like a coward. But here's what she never understood, I continued. You can't destroy someone who refuses to stay down. You can knock me down, but I'll get back up. And when I do, I'll be stronger, smarter, and more dangerous than before. I paused, letting my words sink in. Patricia thought she was so clever, so superior, so untouchable. She thought she could manipulate my entire life like I was some kind of chess piece. But she made one critical mistake. She underestimated exactly who she was fucking with. The judge allowed me to continue, clearly moved by my testimony. I want other women to know that you don't have to accept abuse, manipulation, or betrayal. You don't have to smile and stay quiet while people destroy your life. Sometimes you have to fight back, and sometimes you have to fight dirty. But you never, ever have to just take it. I finally looked directly at Patricia, who was crying again, though whether from remorse or self-pity I couldn't tell and didn't care. You tried to erase me from my own life, Patricia. Instead, you erased yourself from yours. That's the difference between us. I'm a survivor and you're just a criminal. After the sentencing, Margaret Walsh approached me outside the courthouse. She looked older, worn down by months of revelations about her daughter-in-law's crimes. I'm sorry, Sophia. For all of it. For not speaking up sooner, for not protecting you from her, for not stopping this decades ago. You stopped it when it mattered, I told her. That took courage. Margaret smiled sadly. What will you do now? That was a good question. Past year had been consumed by legal proceedings, media attention, and rebuilding my life from the wreckage Patricia had made of it. But now, with the trials over and justice served, I had to figure out what came next. I'd gotten a substantial settlement from the Criminal Restitution Fund, plus damages in my divorce. I owned a beautiful house in Cedar Park, free and clear. My reputation had been completely rehabilitated. I was now seen as the brave whistleblower who'd exposed a massive criminal conspiracy, rather than the bitter ex-wife seeking revenge. More importantly, I'd discovered strengths in myself I never knew I had. I'd learned that I was capable of strategic thinking, long-term planning, and calculated action when pushed to my limits. I'd learned that I could be ruthless when necessary, but still maintain my moral compass. The startup I'd worked for had been acquired during all the chaos, and the founders had made sure I got a healthy payout from the deal as thanks for my years of service. I was financially secure for the first time in my adult life. But what did I want to do with that security? The answer came to me during one of my final interviews with the FBI. Agent Sarah Morrison, who'd led the investigation into Patricia's crimes, made an offhand comment that stuck with me. "You know, you'd make a hell of a private investigator. You've got instincts for this work, and you sure know how to dig up information people want to keep hidden." First, I laughed it off. But the more I thought about it, the more the idea appealed to me. I'd spent months researching Patricia, building a case against her, gathering evidence, and connecting dots. I'd enjoyed the intellectual challenge, the satisfaction of solving puzzles and uncovering truth. More importantly, I'd learned firsthand how it felt to be manipulated and betrayed by people you trusted. I knew what it was like to have your reality questioned and your sanity doubted. I understood the desperation of needing answers and justice. Maybe I could help other people get the truth they deserved. 6 months after Patricia's sentencing, I enrolled in a private investigation certification program. I spent a year learning the technical skills I'd need: surveillance, background checks, legal procedures, evidence gathering. But I already had the most important qualification: the ability to see through people's lies and the determination to keep digging until I found the truth. I opened my practice 2 years after my divorce was finalized, specializing in cases involving marital infidelity, financial fraud, and family deception. My first client was a woman whose husband was acting suspiciously, and she needed to know if he was having an affair. Turns out he was, with his business partner's wife, and they'd been embezzling from their company to fund their relationship. Sound familiar? Within 6 months, I had more clients than I could handle. Word spread quickly in Austin's legal community that Sofia Martinez was the private investigator you called when you needed the truth, no matter how ugly or complicated it might be. I helped wives discover cheating husbands and hidden assets. I helped families uncover elder abuse and financial exploitation. I helped business owners identify employees who were stealing from them. I specialized in cases where powerful people thought they could manipulate and control others without consequences. And you know what the best part was? I was really fucking good at it. 3 years after starting my practice, I got a call that brought everything full circle. A young woman named Jessica, barely 25, was convinced her wealthy boyfriend's family was trying to sabotage their relationship. "They keep making comments about how I'm not right for him, how I'm holding him back from his potential," she told me during our first meeting. "And lately, he's been acting strange. Distant. Critical. Like he's looking for reasons to find fault with me." The story sounded eerily familiar. "Have you noticed any unusual financial activity? Unexplained income or changes in his spending habits?" Jessica nodded. "He's been spending more money lately, but he claims it's just a good investment year. And his mother has been paying for things, expensive dinners, weekend trips. She says she just wants to help us enjoy life while we're young." I took the case. 2 weeks later, I had proof that Jessica's boyfriend's mother had been depositing money into his account every month for the past 6 months. The memo line read, "Monthly allowance, personal development." When I confronted the mother, a woman who reminded me disturbingly of Patricia, she didn't even try to deny it. "Jessica is a lovely girl, but she's not suitable for my son. He'll realize that eventually, but sometimes young men need guidance to make the right decisions." "So, you're paying him to break up with her?" "I'm supporting his personal growth and helping him recognize that he deserves someone who can match his social and intellectual caliber." Same shit, different decade. Same entitled rich woman, same manipulation tactics, same belief that money could buy and sell human relationships. But this time, I was ready for her. I documented everything, the payments, the manipulation, the mother's own admission of what she was doing. Then I sat down with Jessica and her boyfriend and laid out all the evidence. Your mother is literally paying you to leave the woman you claim to love, I told him. How does that make you feel? He looked stunned, genuinely shocked by the implications of what had been happening. Unlike Brandon, this young man had enough integrity to be horrified by his mother's scheme. I thought she was just being generous, he said weakly. I didn't realize. I didn't think. Your mother is manipulating both of you, I explained. She's trying to destroy your relationship the same way my ex-mother-in-law destroyed mine. The only difference is I caught her at it. The boyfriend, his name was Daniel, confronted his mother that evening. When she tried to justify her actions, he cut off all contact with her and moved out of the family home. He and Jessica got engaged 6 months later. I didn't charge them for my services. Some cases are worth more than money. 5 years after Patricia's conviction, I received a letter from her in prison. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. Sophia, it began, written in Patricia's still elegant handwriting. I know you have no reason to listen to anything I have to say, but I need you to know that I understand now what I did to you was wrong. The letter went on for several pages, detailing Patricia's life in federal prison, her therapy sessions, and her supposed journey toward understanding the harm she'd caused. I told myself I was protecting my family, that I was doing what any mother would do to secure her son's future. But I know now that I was just protecting my own interests, my own lifestyle, my own sense of control. She talked about the other women she'd destroyed over the years, the families she'd torn apart, the lives she'd ruined in pursuit of money and power. I can't undo the damage I've done, but I can acknowledge it. You were innocent, Sophia. You deserved better than what Brandon and I put you through. You deserved honesty, respect, and the chance to build a real marriage with someone who loved you. The letter ended with something I never expected to see from Patricia Walsh, genuine remorse. I hope you found happiness and peace. I hope you've built a life that brings you joy. And I hope someday you might find it in your heart to forgive me, not for my sake, but for yours. I read that letter 3 times, trying to decide how I felt about it. Was Patricia genuinely reformed, or was this just another manipulation tactic? Was she truly sorry, or just sorry she'd been caught? In the end, I decided it didn't matter. Whether Patricia's remorse was real or fake wouldn't change what she'd done to me. It wouldn't give me back the years of marriage she'd destroyed or erase the trauma of discovering my husband had been bought and paid for. But I was surprised to realize that I didn't hate her anymore. The burning rage that had fueled my quest for revenge had cooled into something more like pity. Patricia was a 70-year-old woman dying slowly in federal prison, surrounded by enemies instead of the family she'd claimed to be protecting. She'd gotten exactly what she deserved, and that was justice enough. I never wrote her back. 7 years have passed since Patricia Walsh was sentenced to federal prison, and I'm writing this story from my office in downtown Austin. The brass nameplate on my door reads, Sophia Martinez, licensed private investigator, and I couldn't be prouder of those words. My practice has grown beyond anything I imagined when I started. I have 4 employees now, 2 other investigators and 2 research assistants, and we handle everything from corporate fraud investigations to missing persons cases. But my specialty remains what it's always been, exposing the truth when powerful people think they can manipulate and control others. I've helped hundreds of people over the past 7 years. Women who suspected their husbands were cheating. Men who thought their business partners were stealing. Families who were being financially exploited by caretakers or relatives. Each case reminds me why I chose this work, because everyone deserves to know the truth about their own life. But the most satisfying cases are still the ones where I help someone escape from the kind of psychological manipulation I experienced with Patricia and Brandon. Just last month, I helped a young man realize his girlfriend was systematically isolating him from his friends and family while draining his bank account. 3 months ago, I exposed a financial advisor who was targeting elderly clients and convincing them to sign over power of attorney before looting their life savings. These predators are everywhere, and they all operate the same way. They identify vulnerable targets, gain their trust, then systematically exploit and destroy them. The only difference is the scale and sophistication of their schemes. What I've learned from all these cases is that predators like Patricia aren't born evil. They're created by a combination of entitlement, desperation, and the gradual erosion of moral boundaries. Patricia started with small lies and minor manipulations, then escalated over decades until she was running criminal conspiracies that destroyed dozens of lives. The scariest part? She genuinely believed she was justified in everything she did. In her mind, she was just a woman doing whatever it took to protect her family and maintain her lifestyle. She never saw her victims as real people with their own hopes, dreams, and rights. That's the most dangerous kind of criminal, the one who commits evil acts while believing they're the hero of their own story. Brandon was released from federal prison last year after serving 8 years of his 12-year sentence. I heard through mutual connections that he'd moved to Dallas and was working as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm, the only job he could get with his felony convictions. I don't know if he ever tried to contact me after his release, and I don't care. As far as I'm concerned, Brandon Walsh died the day I discovered those bank records. The man I married never really existed. He was just a character Patricia created to trap me in their criminal conspiracy. Margaret Walsh passed away 3 years ago, and I was surprised when her lawyer contacted me about her will. She'd left me her entire collection of family photographs and documents, boxes of memories from before Patricia entered their lives. Looking through those photos, I could see glimpses of the man Brandon might have been if he'd been raised by someone other than Patricia. Pictures of a sweet little boy playing in the yard, a teenager proudly showing off his baseball trophies, a young man graduating from college with genuine joy on his face. Patricia had stolen that potential and twisted it into something ugly and criminal. In a way, Brandon was as much her victim as I was, just one who'd chosen to become complicit in her crimes rather than escape them. But I learned not to waste time mourning what might have been. The Brandon Walsh I married was a lie, and I'm better off without him. The real question I get asked most often by clients, by friends, by journalists who still occasionally call for updates on the Patricia Walsh case, is whether I regret how I handled everything. Whether I wish I'd taken the high road instead of orchestrating Patricia's destruction. My answer is always the same. I don't regret anything. Could I have just walked away from my marriage, taken whatever settlement I could get, and started fresh somewhere else? Sure. Would that have been the mature thing to do? Probably. But here's what people don't understand. Walking away would have meant letting Patricia win. It would have meant accepting that powerful people can destroy innocent lives without consequences. It would have meant that every future victim of Patricia's schemes would suffer because I was too nice to fight back. By exposing Patricia and Brandon, I didn't just get justice for myself, I prevented them from destroying countless other lives. The FBI estimates that Patricia would have stolen at least another $1 million from charities if her scheme hadn't been exposed. Judge Hendricks would have continued making judicial decisions while being blackmailed by a criminal. Brandon would have kept helping his mother launder stolen money while pretending to be a legitimate businessman. How many other marriages would Patricia have destroyed? How many other naive young women would have found themselves married to men who'd been paid to betray them? How many more children would have suffered because money meant for their care was being spent on Patricia's luxury lifestyle? I stopped all of that. Not by being nice or forgiving or taking the high road, but by fighting back with everything I had. And you know what? I sleep great at night knowing that. The most unexpected consequence of everything that happened has been the platform it gave me to help other women in similar situations. I get contacted regularly by women who've seen my story in the media and want advice on dealing with their own manipulative in-laws, cheating husbands, or abusive relationships. I always tell them the same thing: document everything, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that you're crazy for questioning their behavior. Most importantly, I tell them that they have the right to fight back. They have the right to expose the truth, to seek justice, and to make sure their abusers face consequences for their actions. You don't have to be polite to people who are destroying your life. You don't have to protect the feelings of people who don't give a damn about yours. You don't have to be the bigger person when someone is actively trying to make you smaller. Sometimes being kind to yourself means being ruthless with your enemies. I've also become something of an expert on financial fraud and charity scams. I consult with law enforcement agencies on complex cases, and I've testified before Congress about the need for better oversight of charitable organizations. Patricia's crimes were enabled by a system that trusted people in positions of authority without requiring adequate verification or monitoring. Too many charities operate on the assumption that wealthy volunteers are automatically trustworthy, and that assumption makes them sitting targets for sophisticated predators. The laws have gotten stronger since Patricia's conviction, but there's still work to be done. Every few months, I read about another charity scandal, another trusted community leader who was secretly stealing from the people they claimed to serve. The saddest part is how often these crimes go unreported or unprosecuted because the victims, usually non-profit organizations, are afraid of the negative publicity. They'd rather quietly fire the embezzler and try to move on than expose the full scope of what was stolen. That needs to change. Charity fraud isn't a victimless crime. Every dollar stolen from a legitimate charity is a dollar that doesn't reach the people who desperately need it. As for my personal life, I've learned to be much more careful about who I trust and why. I've had a few relationships over the years, but I haven't remarried. Maybe someday I'll find someone worth taking that risk with again, but I'm in no hurry. I like my life the way it is. I have work that matters, friends who respect me, and financial security I earn through my own efforts. I don't need someone else to complete me or make me happy. I'm already complete and happy on my own. That's probably the most important lesson from everything that happened. You can't build a healthy relationship from a position of weakness or desperation. You have to know who you are and what you're worth before you can recognize someone else who's worthy of your love and trust. The naive 26-year-old who married Brandon Walsh thought she needed a man to rescue her from her circumstances. The 34-year-old woman writing this story knows she's perfectly capable of rescuing herself. I get letters sometimes from other women who've been through similar situations. They thank me for sharing my story and tell me how it inspired them to fight back against their own abusers. Those letters mean more to me than any amount of money or media attention. If my story helps even one woman realize she doesn't have to accept manipulation and betrayal, then everything I went through was worth it. But the letter that meant the most came from an unexpected source, Judge Hendrick's daughter, Amanda. She wrote to me about 6 months after her father's sentencing, explaining how Patricia's blackmail scheme had destroyed her family. Her parents' 40-year marriage had ended in bitter divorce when her mother learned about the affair and the years of payments. Her father's reputation was destroyed, his career over, his relationships with his children and grandchildren poisoned by shame and betrayal. "I want you to know that I don't blame you for exposing the truth," Amanda wrote. "My father made his choices and Patricia exploited them, but you were just protecting yourself and bringing justice for her victims. What happened to my family was awful, but it was the consequence of lies and crimes that had been hidden for too long." She went on to explain how her family was slowly healing, how her father was working to make amends, and how they were all learning to build their relationships on honesty instead of secrets. "Thank you for being brave enough to speak up," she concluded. "It cost my family dearly, but we're stronger now because we're finally living in the truth instead of hiding from it." That letter reminded me why I chose to fight back instead of just walking away. Truth is painful sometimes, but lies are always more destructive in the long run. People sometimes ask me if I think Patricia is genuinely reformed, if her letter to me represented real remorse or just another manipulation. Honestly, I don't know, and I've stopped caring. What matters isn't whether Patricia has found religion or therapy or whatever passes for redemption in federal prison. What matters is that she can't hurt anyone else. She's in her 70s now, serving a 25-year sentence with no possibility of parole for at least another 15 years. Even if she lives that long, she'll be too old and too notorious to run another con. Justice isn't about redemption or forgiveness, it's about consequences and protection. Patricia is facing the consequences of her crimes, and society is protected from her predatory behavior. That's enough for me. As I finish writing this story, I'm preparing for another trial where I'll testify as an expert witness. This case involves a different kind of family manipulation. Adult children who systematically isolated their elderly father and convinced him to change his will in their favor while cutting out the other siblings who'd been caring for him. Same pattern, different players. The details change, but the fundamental dynamic remains the same. Predators identifying vulnerable targets and exploiting their trust for financial gain. These cases never get easier emotionally, but they do get easier professionally. I've learned to recognize the warning signs, to document the evidence methodically, and to present the facts in ways that judges and juries can understand. Most importantly, I've learned that there are more good people than bad people in the world. For every Patricia Walsh, there are dozens of genuinely caring individuals who put others' needs ahead of their own. For every Brandon who chooses to participate in his mother's crimes, there are countless sons and daughters who would never betray someone they claim to love. The existence of predators doesn't negate the existence of genuinely good people, it just makes it more important to learn how to tell the difference. So that's my story. The naive young wife who thought love conquered all became the private investigator who specializes in exposing the truth when people think they can lie and manipulate without consequences. Patricia Walsh thought she could destroy my life and walk away unscathed. Instead, she gave me a purpose, a career, and a platform to help other people protect themselves from predators like her. In trying to erase me from my own story, she inadvertently made me the hero of it. And you know what the best part is? I'm just getting started. Every day brings new cases, new opportunities to help people discover the truth about their own lives. Every investigation is a chance to stop another predator before they can destroy more families. Every client who walks out of my office with answers and evidence is a victory against the people who think they can manipulate and control others. Patricia Walsh may have taken 2 years of my life, but she gave me a lifetime of meaningful work in return. Call that a fair trade. So that's my story. From betrayal to courtroom justice, from heartbreak to rebuilding my life on my own terms. What they meant to destroy me with only sharpened my edge. Patricia thought she could erase me. Brandon thought he could sell me out and move on. But I didn't just survive. I made damn sure they'd never forget who they tried to play. And if you felt that, if you were right there with me, fists clenched and heart pounding, then you already know the stories don't stop here. There are so many more. Stories about women like me, women who were told they should just be grateful. Who were told to stay quiet, play nice, and be lucky they were even in the room. Like in the next one where she said I was lucky to be there, but then she lost the one thing she wasn't watching. Trust me, you don't want to miss that. So if this story got to you, if you were nodding along or even yelling yes at your screen, tap that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you're first in line when the next story drops. 'Cause around here, karma isn't just an idea, it's a daily event. I'll see you in the next one.